Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is August 14th, a Wednesday around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to start with a couple of questions about this upcoming season. Will it live up to the hype? Will the postseason or the regular season be a bigger reason for that? A number of different things that we'll dive into and why this season is so anticipated as it is. Then we'll get into a couple of playoff chaos teams, a couple of teams that I think could just totally turn this thing on its head, a couple of teams that maybe might not make it into the field but easily could screw things up for some other teams. Then we'll get into some of my favorite futures bets as we get into this season. I'll give some championship bets, some Heisman bets, some win totals that I like. We'll get into fall camp intel. We are probably going to do this every single day this week because there is stuff coming in pretty much every single second, so we got to keep you guys updated there. And then we'll do a little bit of a headline catch up. A number of different things happened in the early part of this week that I just want to make sure I have on y'all's radar. Before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we have tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and we now have super thanks in the Sports Network YouTube page. If you want to go over there and utilize that, you are more than welcome. It is a great way for you all to get involved in the show, have an interactive experience here. That's always fun for the both of us. Definitely helps us as well, obviously. Very, very appreciative if anyone can do that. Also, we still have the GSMC Podcast.net page if that's a little bit easier for you, but sometimes when you can just go down to the bottom of the chat, find that little dollar sign and give a little tip and a question, it's definitely a little bit easier, no doubt about that. So definitely use that if you'd like to. Would love to have a little bit of conversation during this show, but let's get into this season because we talked about this season a lot. You know, there's a lot of different things going into it. There's a lot of variables as we kind of head towards this season. And I think when we talk about it, there's all this energy put towards the postseason, right? We're talking about the 12-team playoff. We're talking about all the craziness that can come of that. And frankly, it's going to be crazy. There's no two ways about that. I think we all understand it's going to be a little bit more off the walls than a 4-team playoff or definitely the BCS back in the day. I think most of that's going to happen in the regular season. I think we're going to see a playoff that is fun. Don't get me wrong. We're going to get those home field environments. We're going to get some games that we don't usually get. Maybe a Penn State, Texas. Maybe an Oregon against Missouri. Who knows? We'll get some games that'll be very, very fun. But at the end of the day, I do think it'll be a little bit more straightforward in the postseason. I do think we'll be looking at the postseason and say, you know, that team's just deeper than the other team. That team is just a little bit better, and we think they're better going into that game. They come out as the winner. So I don't know if we're going to see too many crazy postseason results. I think we're going to see some really fun games. I think we're going to see some really cool atmospheres. I don't know if we see, you know, a 12 seed beat a 5 seed or anything crazy like that. But the thing about that is, I don't know if it really hurts anything. I don't know if it really changes the way that I look at the 12-team playoff or the way I look at college football especially, which I'll get into here in a second. But you talk about the 12-team playoff. I mean, the SEC probably has 8 teams that they think are in the hunt. The Big Ten probably has at least 7 that think they're in the hunt. The Big 12 probably has about 9 or 8 that think they're in the hunt. The ACC has at least 6, maybe even 17. So you're talking about a number of teams that now go into this season thinking, we can realistically get into the dance, and from there, who knows what can happen. The group of 5, that doesn't even include them, 10 to 15 teams could easily picture themselves being that team that gets into the field. So you're up to, you know, roughly 50, 45 teams that are going into this season thinking, we just got to get into the dance. It might not be the prettiest thing in the world. We definitely have to have a couple of things go our direction, but we can find our way there. 12 teams, I mean, when you go back to the 4-team playoff, there were probably about 12 teams, maybe even 10 teams that really thought they had a real shot at the national title. Now it's closer to about 40. And whether or not those people actually have a shot to a national title is up for debate. But the reality is, hope is everything. You know, in this sport, when you're realizing you're going into fall camp and not playing for an 8-win season, not playing to make a bowl game, you're playing to possibly, you know, be in that postseason battle, possibly go up to State College and play Penn State in a night game on that first Saturday. So there's so much that goes into the season, and it comes down to a couple of teams that, you know, maybe didn't think they had a real shot in the past that definitely do now. Now, Penn State is absolutely a team that thought they had a shot in the past, just weren't quite able to get over that hump. Auburn is one that has been sitting on the outside looking in. And I think they're a team that, this year I'm not necessarily expecting them to make the playoff, but definitely a team that can make some noise and a team that in the future could be a very consistent team in the playoff because they are very capable of being a top 12 team every single year. But the other thing I wanted to get into, the 12-team playoff is obviously the crux of all of this, but the talent level of this upcoming year is insane to me. And I think it's not only, the top teams that are incredible. Obviously, Ohio State and Georgia are outright wild. They have incredible amounts of talent, are incredibly deep, have so much going for them. I don't think they're far and above the teams right behind them. And I don't think, Texas and Oregon are far above Bama and Ole Miss. And then you keep going down that line. I don't see a team that is far and above the best team in the country. I think Georgia is the best team in the country as we head into this year. I don't think it's a huge gap by any means. So I do think that adds to this as well. But also, you can find great players anywhere this upcoming year. And frankly, that's usually always the case. It just feels like this year might be a little bit more the case, where you have Torrey Horton at Colorado State, you have Ricky White at UNLV, you have Ashton Jeanty in that picture right there, one of the best running backs in the country over at Boise State. You have Clay Webb, one of the best O-linemen in the country at Jacksonville State. So you can go down a level and still find incredible players that are going to play many, many years on Sundays. So I think that adds to this a little bit. And on top of all of that, you have freshmen that are coming in that are going to make plays, whether it's Cam Coleman or Ryan Wingo. There are a lot of wide receivers that are going to make plays, but you talk about some of the freshmen that are going to come in. These guys are going to have real effects. It's not just, they're going to catch a pass here and there or make a big play from time to time. Cam Coleman could easily be the leading receiver on Auburn this upcoming year. So that's kind of adds to this flavor where Texas has, seventh-year Jermaine Lole making plays, and then right next to him, it's going to be freshman Colin Simmons making plays off the edge. So it gives you an idea of how much fun this environment is going to be this upcoming year. And then you talk about realignment. Obviously, it's taken a lot of things from us, but it gave us back one of the best rivalries in college football in Texas and Texas A&M. And I think that one, when it is played, a lot of people are going to remember, this is likely a good move for Texas, good move for a lot of different things as we head into the next part of this college football journey, I suppose. But the Big 12, I think, is one conference that got gutted a little bit. Losing Texas and OU obviously was not the way they wanted to go about business by any means, but they added so many teams that, don't offset the scale by any means. You add Utah, who is the best team going into this year, but they're not far and above these other teams. And I think there's a number of teams this year where you look at the Big 12, there's 10 teams I could make the argument could make it to Arlington at the end of the year, and that's a ton of fun. That makes for a really, really fun conference. So although you lose Texas and OU and you lose some of that reach you have in the media markets and all of that type of stuff, you had a couple of teams that make your conference that much more competitive, that much more fun, and definitely more of a spectacle as you head through the rest of the season. So I think you just get a lot. I don't think realignment, obviously, it took some stuff from us. There's no two ways about that, and I'm not here to act like it is the number one best thing in the world by any means, but you do get some matchups that you absolutely love. You do get Ohio State, Oregon almost every year. You do get Michigan playing Oregon and Penn State flying out to USC to play. There's so many different games that we'd get, once every couple of years that we're going to get every single year now. And obviously it's not the normal games that we're used to getting. And obviously we're losing some that very much need to be preserved, like the Bedlam game, like Oregon State, Oregon. But at the end of the day, I feel like as we head into this new world of realignment, there's so many things to not like about it, but when you get some of these games on the docket, I don't think we're going to be thinking about realignment too much. I don't think we're going to be too upset that Oregon found their way into the Big Ten and is playing Ohio State while that game's going on by any means. And then finally, my favorite part of this upcoming season. There's an I don't know factor this season that is unlike anything else. There is nothing that is guaranteed as we head into this thing. I mean, I've made a ton of predictions as we head into this year, and I feel pretty good about all of them, frankly. The only one that I don't feel great about is Travion Henderson for Doak Walker, but that's a totally side argument. I think Omarion Hampton might be my pick there if I were to redo it. But at the end of the day, you have to say almost I don't know at the end of every single conversation you have. You can say, I think Georgia and Ohio State are going to meet in the national title. But I don't know. Something could come up and things could go wrong for them. I think Texas and Oregon are going to be able to make runs in their new conference. But I don't know. This physicality could easily get to them and kind of throw a wrench into those works. I think, Colorado can make a run. But I don't know. There are a lot of new players there and definitely some things that could get really sketchy. Or on the flip side, I think Colorado's not going to be great. But I don't know. When you have Shadur Sanders under center, you can do a lot of special things. So I think as you go into the season, there's not this, we don't know that Georgia is going to go undefeated. We don't know that Georgia is going to be in the SEC title. And we don't know that, Ohio State is going to be right there in the conversation by the time they get to that Michigan game. Frankly, I think they are going to be. But as you head into this season, there's so many variables. There's a million different things that can go wrong for a team, whether it's, losing a game early in the season that you don't think is a big deal, but ends up being one because you drop a random one in the middle of conference play and knock yourself out of the playoff. Or you're playing a game late in the season against, UCF. You're Utah and you're playing the last game of the season against UCF. They steal one from you and knock you off your pedestal and keep you out of the Big 12, excuse me, I apologize, keep you out of the Big 12 championship. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. So overall, I think you look at this season and there are questions. Everyone has questions about how everything's going to work out and how all of this stuff is going to, really play out at the end of the day. But that's kind of the beauty. Knowing that we're going to have a regular season that's going to be off the charts incredible and it's going to be all over the place, I think does something for the sport that we've missed over the last little bit, where I understand everyone's looking towards the playoff. I understand everyone's thinking about how incredible the playoff's going to be. But let's say we have a wild regular season followed by a straightforward postseason. That puts the energy where it's supposed to be, which is on the regular season, which is on all of the incredible games that happen from September to November. So at the end of the day, I think we can look at the playoff and we can be enamored by it. And I love a number of things about the 12-team playoff, although I'm not necessarily the biggest 12-team playoff fan. I do think at the end of the day, as we get into this year, we're going to realize the regular season just got more special, and the postseason, although it's more teams there, didn't change too much. And I think that almost lends itself to college football being what makes it special, which is lean into the regular season. Make all of the energy around the rivalry games and the traditions within those stadiums and all of the incredible things that we see in the regular season, and maybe don't put as much energy into the playoff. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of energy put there, but at the end of the day, I think when we have a wild regular season and maybe a straightforward playoff, everyone's going to take a look around and say, maybe this regular season thing is the thing we should be focusing on a little bit more aggressively. But at the end of the day, it's going to be an incredible year. It's going to be all over the place. It's going to be every which way you could possibly imagine. And at the end of it, someone's going to win a 12-team playoff. And it might just be one of two teams that will ever win a 12-team playoff. But we're 10 days out. You can almost feel it. Everything feels a little bit different around this time of year. And we're getting very close to that toe meeting the leather and we get underway. But cannot wait. Definitely a ton of things that go into this season, and I think this regular season is going to be downright special. I can promise you that. But let's take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some playoff chaos teams, some teams that, if they throw their hat into the ring, could make things very, very interesting very quickly. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about this upcoming season, how it's going to be a wild regular season. Whether or not that translates to the playoff, I'm not sure, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be downright special and it's going to live up to the hype that has been brought for it. But let's get into some playoff chaos teams, some teams that it's just going to be wild if they're able to blow up, hit the notes that they're supposed to hit, and possibly throw their hat into the ring for a college football playoff berth. And I want to go ahead and jump in here, and we'll start in the SEC. I want to talk about Texas A&M because I think a lot of people have laughed off this idea that Texas A&M is capable of throwing their hat into the ring. I think a lot of people saw what happened during the Jimbo Fisher era and have kind of just written them off as a team that you'll hear a lot about but won't end up delivering at the end of the day. I think the thing about that is the whole philosophy around Jimbo Fisher was just wrong, in my opinion. I think he had a really talented roster. I think he had a number of things in place. And last year, although there were injuries, I think he had a quarterback that could be very, very dangerous. Nothing really came into play because the offensive scheme was not where it needed to be, because everything behind the scenes seemed to be a little bit all over the place and not where it needed to be by any means. And you're going into a year where, yes, there is a lot of changes. Mike Elko coming in, a number of different things that could throw you off kilter. You also have, in my estimation, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country. If Connor Wegman can hit the notes that he wasn't able to do a year ago because of injuries and a number of different things, this team is going to be dangerous. And there is a world where they walk into that Texas game in the last week of the season, and maybe they're not, in the SEC title, but they're a 8-3 team. And if they win that game, they put themselves in a really good spot to possibly be an at-large bid. And if that's the case, that place is going to be on absolute fire. And I think that's a game that could be huge for this playoff race. So overall, I think A&M is a team that I understand people are talking about them, but it's kind of in hushed whispers. I think it could be a little bit louder. There's a very good team, and I think they're going to be really dangerous this upcoming year. Moving on to Florida, I think we can't have a conversation about chaos teams without including Florida, if I'm being totally honest. When you play a schedule like that, they don't even have to go 9-3 to be a team that screws up the playoff in all types of ways. They play Georgia, they play Tennessee, they play Florida State at the end of the year. There are so many different opportunities for them to maybe not throw their hat into the ring, but absolutely to screw it up for someone else. And frankly, say they win the first 3 games of the year. They beat Miami, they dominate Samford, and they beat A&M at home. That's momentum. And we talked about this a couple of days ago. That's all they need, really. There's a very talented team, a team that has a number of things going for it. They need confidence, and they need to be able to all be looking in the same direction and say, maybe we can pull off something special this upcoming year. And I think if they win those first couple of games, things get really interesting. And even if they don't, they absolutely will be a team that you look up in week 10 and they've knocked off a team that felt like a playoff team at that point. So definitely will be something to watch. Moving over to the Big Ten, I got Rutgers as a team to watch. There are a couple of people that have laughed at me just a little bit for this one. They're going to pose problems for every single team that they play. They have every single ability that you want them to have, especially in the Big Ten where physicality is the currency. That is the way that you win football games, is being able to run in between the tackles, being able to push people off the ball. And Rutgers can do both of those things. They have one of the best running backs in the country, Kyle Mondegai. The schedule is very manageable when you're talking about a Big Ten schedule, so I would be surprised if they didn't get to 8 wins, if I'm being totally honest. And 9 wins is very much in reach, and at that point, some things get pretty interesting for Rutgers this upcoming year. So I don't know if they're going to make the playoff. I don't know if they're really going to compete for the playoff. I know they are a team that whenever someone comes into their town, they're going to have a tough time playing them, and that kind of makes for these chaos teams. USC is a team that a lot of people are looking at a very different way than I am, and it makes me a little bit nervous, I won't lie to you, but at the end of the day, I think this defense doesn't have to come nearly as far as some people think it does. I think some people are under the impression that they have to make it up to top 40, top 50 in the country, and they probably do have to do that in the future to win a national title. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to win a national title by any means, but they don't have to do too much. You have Miller Moss, you have a wide receiver core that I think is one of the best in the country. You have Lincoln Riley calling plays, which is the most important. So you're going to score. That's not going to be an issue. You just need a defense that's going to put the ball in their hands. You just need a defense that's going to take the ball away a couple of times. And they have a number of chances to make some noise this upcoming year where Penn State comes to them. Notre Dame comes to LA. LSU is a game that's in Las Vegas. They have to travel all the way over there for it. You don't have to go too far. Those are all games that they can win. Now, do I think they're going to win all of those games? Probably not. But at the end of the day, they're coming into their house, and if you play opportunistic defense, they take a small step forward on that side of the ball, they're going to be able to score with anyone in the country. So it's a very dangerous team, one that I think is just needs to be talked about a little bit more realistically, not in the way of if this defense comes along, I think the defense is going to improve. The question is, how much does it get better? And the question is, how many of those big time games, the Penn State, Notre Dame, those type of games, how many of those can they win? Frankly, I think it might be on the lower side, but at the end of the day, when you have that pop potential on the offensive side of the ball, it's hard for me to sit here and say they can't make some noise in the playoff race. Over to the ACC, I got NC State being my number one team. We've talked about this team a lot, and frankly, I would love to talk about them more. They are so much fun as we head into this year, and I think the guy on the screen, Kevin Concepcion, is a huge reason for that. But they have two games on their schedule that are against ranked teams. They play Tennessee in week 2. They play Clemson a little bit later in the year, so it's not the craziest schedule by any means. Now, they do have to go to Georgia Tech. They have to play at Cal. They have to play Syracuse, go to UNC. There are some games that definitely could pose problems, but they should win all of those games, and that could put them at a 10-2 record. And frankly, that Tennessee game in week 2 is one of the more important that we're not talking about for some reason. We have to be able to put a little bit more energy into this one because those are two ranked teams, and those are two teams that have every chance to win their conference. But they might just need that one in week 2 to get a little bit of momentum going, get a little juice going in their veins, and definitely let this season fall into place the way they want. But if NC State is able to walk into Charlotte and somehow get that win over Tennessee, they could be on their way to an 11-1 season and easily an ACC title berth. So very, very, very interesting team to watch, and I think, frankly, one of the most explosive offensive teams that you'll see this entire year. So cannot wait for them. Georgia Tech is another team I want to talk about out of this conference because they are firmly in the Florida boat. The schedule is an absolute nightmare, and if somehow, some way they find themselves in 9-3, they got to be in the field. Frankly, I don't think they're finding their way to 9-3, but overall, they are another team like Florida that they don't have to go 9-3. They could easily go 7-5 and still cause problems for the playoff picture, where they play they play Florida State in 10 days in Ireland. That's a game where if they leave with a win, Florida State's season just got a lot more confusing and a lot more sketchy. They go to Syracuse, they play Louisville, they play UNC, they go to Virginia Tech. All those games they likely will not be favored in. Maybe they'll be favored against Syracuse, but definitely will be one to watch. I think overall, this is a team that can win all of those games. And frankly, if they do, then you're looking at a team that has gone on the road to Blacksburg and gotten a huge win, has gone on the road to Louisville and gotten a huge win, and you're putting yourself in a position where maybe you're not going to be in the playoff picture, maybe you're not going to make a ton of noise, but every single year you're getting a little bit better, and you're setting yourself up for a 2025 where you might just be a team that they're not looking at, a very dark horse to win the conference. You're looking at one of the top teams in the conference as you head into the year. So definitely will be a crazy year. Obviously, you have UGA, you have Miami coming to you, you have NC State in ATL and Notre Dame in ATL. So a number of games that are going to be a problem. I'm not acting like this Georgia Tech team is going to run the table and make it to the playoff by any means, but they could easily beat a Miami team. They could easily beat an NC State team. They could beat a Notre Dame team at home, and that could cause problems for just about everyone in that group. And they only lost to Georgia by 8 points last year. Now, I tend to believe it's going to go the opposite direction this upcoming year, but they're a team that can cause some problems, that's for sure, and I definitely think they're a team that's going to be just so much fun to watch this year. Colorado has to be on this list, frankly. I don't think there's any list of chaos teams in the playoff race without having them on the list. When you have someone like Shedeur Sanders on your team, you can do a lot of really special things. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I believe I had him ranked at number 4. I think I might have him right around that range right about now. So a very, very talented guy. Obviously, a lot of transition here. There's no question about it. But let's say the line of scrimmage play gets 50% better. They give up half the sacks they did a year ago, which frankly might be a little bit lofty. But at the end of the day, let's just say like they can do that. They're going to be able to win a ton of games because the reality is it's just keeping Shedeur Sanders upright. Everyone has to keep their quarterback upright. Everyone has to deal with that, but Colorado has to do it maybe more than any other team. And frankly, the other team that has to do it a ton is the team they play in week 2, Nebraska. That's going to be very, very interesting. Frankly, I think this entire season could come down to Nebraska and Arizona in week 2 and week 8 respectively, because both those games are in Boulder. If you win in week 2, you're in a position where you could get rolling, and possibly that O-line has a little bit more time to develop, and then you're really dangerous, and then you can do a number of different things. So I picked Colorado to go 6-6. I think that would be a plenty successful season. but they are a team that can cause some problems. They are a team that could possibly find themselves in a little bit of a groove after week 4, week 5, and possibly find their way into a Big 12 title. I wouldn't necessarily bet on it, but definitely will be a fun one to watch. UCF is another team I want to watch because I'm not the biggest UCF guy. There's no two ways about that. I've been very, very honest about that, but it doesn't mean the potential's not there. Gus Malzahn's offense, KJ Jefferson's ability to run the ball, although not, crazy elite, is definitely something to watch. And I think they brought in a number of really good players, and RJ Harvey is about as good of a running back as you're going to find in this conference. So they have 2 layups before they go to TCU and then play Colorado at home. Win both of those, you go into Gainesville undefeated, and you play a Florida team that you're probably not going to be favored against, and they definitely have the talent lean in that one. But at the end of the day, you have a win. There is a win in the cards for them in that game, and especially if Florida is kind of reeling, is maybe 1-2 at that point, then you get really interesting, and things get very, very fun for UCF. And I think they have a number of different games that they can win. They have 2 more ranked matchups on the schedule after those 4 games, and they have Iowa State and West Virginia on the road, so those will definitely be tough. But overall, this is a team that could easily be the story of the year. Could be a team that put together a portal roster like a lot of the teams we've seen in the past and is able to find a lot of success. So really like that team. I think it's one that, I'm very much split on. Don't necessarily think they're going to be able to put it all together, but doesn't mean they can't, and it doesn't mean that they don't have the potential to put it all together in. If they do, it's a very dangerous team. But let's take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to do some of my favorite futures bets as we head into the season. I have a couple of win totals, a couple of Heisman picks, and a couple of national title picks that I'll get into right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the chaos teams in the playoff race. Definitely some teams that, whether or not they're in the race, I don't know, but they play a number of teams that could easily be in it, and they could easily cause problems for those teams. But let's get into some favorite best bets that I have as we head into this season. There are a number of win totals that I like the over in. There are a couple of Heisman picks that I think are worth looking at, and then some championship picks that I'll get into at the very end. But let's go ahead and jump in here, and let's start with some win totals. And overall, I think you have a number of different teams to choose from. I'm doing all of the overs today. Maybe I'll do another segment a little bit later in the week that has all the unders, who knows. But at the end of the day, I'm going to start with USC. I talked about them just a second ago. I am higher on this team than a lot of other people are. I think USC has 4 games that I look at right now and I just don't like them in. I think when you look at LSU, the first game, don't necessarily love them in that game, although that's a total toss-up. Easily could be a USC win. At Michigan's going to be a tough one. Penn State, Notre Dame. Those are the games that I don't necessarily love them in. Everything else, I think they absolutely have a chance to win and probably will be favored in those games. Obviously, the Nebraska game will be very close. Obviously, there are a couple other games on here. Rutgers coming to town is going to be interesting. Wisconsin as well. But at the end of the day, they have a number of games that come to them, right? All of those games I just listed are all in LA, which makes a total difference when, they're not flying from Washington. They're flying from State College, or they're flying from Piscataway, New Jersey. So it's definitely going to be a struggle for them, and I think at the very least, this team's going to find their way to 8 wins. I believe that I have them at 9 wins with, I believe, a win over Notre Dame. I can't remember exactly which one I picked there, but overall, this is a very dangerous team, and I think they're going to be able to put up a ton of points and at least find their way to 8 wins. It might not be the prettiest season in the world, and the defense likely still has a long way to go, but absolutely a team that can make some noise and get to 8 wins, maybe even 9 wins. USF is the other one I want to talk about. This is one that I'm shouting out a little bit Ohio State here for over at Barstool because he gave a little bit of a bet. This was actually USF over 7, which is even nicer. But at the end of the day, I do think this is going to be the pick. They have at Bama, they play Miami at home, Memphis at home, and then go to Tulane. Those are the only games that I'm worried about for them. When you talk about this schedule that is very manageable, obviously at Bama is a nightmare. Obviously Miami coming to them. Let's just say those are 2 losses, no doubt about that. You have Bethune-Cookman, you have Southern Miss, you have UAB, Navy, Charlotte, Tulsa, Rice. All of those games should be win. There's no 2 ways about that. That's 7 games right there. At FAU is the last one, and at FAU is a game that I very much like USF, and both teams are very good, but overall, I very much like USF, and frankly, I wouldn't overlook Memphis coming to their place, or even Miami coming to their place. This is a very dangerous team with one of the best, most electric players in the country in Byron Brown, so they can make some noise, I can promise you that, and with this schedule, I would be a little bit surprised if they didn't get to at least 8 wins. Colorado over 5.5 is another one that I like. I think you look at this team and there's some questions. And frankly, this schedule is not easy by any means. There is definitely a tough schedule here and they have somewhat of a narrow road. But at the end of the day, Shedeur Sanders is going to make plays. There's going to be a couple of games this year where they're playing a Kansas State at home or they're playing, a Utah at home, and they're playing much better football than people expect them to play. I don't know if they're going to win those games, but you look at a couple of games that I think they're almost definitely going to win, and if they don't win, then something's gone very, very wrong. North Dakota State, I've talked about it a lot. It is a sketchy game. They should be able to win it. Going to Colorado State is one that obviously gave them trouble a year ago. They're a much better team. They absolutely should win that game. Baylor and Cincinnati are 2 ones that they should win as well. Then you have, at UCF. Then you have a Nebraska game that absolutely could go your way. You have, Kansas State. You have at Arizona, which is an interesting one. At Texas Tech. So there's a couple of games that they can pick off here. I have them going 6-6. I think they could go 7-5. They're going to be able to steal some of these games that you wouldn't expect them to because of the prerequisite talent level at the quarterback position and at some of the skill positions. They're going to be able to make some plays against the Utahs and against the Kansas State and the Oklahoma States of the world. So maybe it's not the prettiest season. Maybe it does end on a little bit of a skid. But overall, I do think there's a team that gets to at least 6 wins and likely 7 wins this upcoming year. Georgia Tech over 4.5. I just talked about them a little ago. This one feels like a layup, if I'm being totally honest, although it is a incredibly tough schedule. I'll be totally honest. When you have Georgia, but you have 4 wins. You definitely have 4 wins in Georgia State, VMI, I think Duke, and Syracuse. Those are all games that you should be able to win. Now, Syracuse is a little bit more sketchy. There's no doubt about that, but definitely is a game that they can win. But then you got to find a win between Florida State, at Louisville, at UNC, which frankly they've won quite a bit in the past, at Miami coming to them, which is a very interesting one given what happened last year, and NC State. Those are the games that you have to find at least one win in, and frankly, I think they're going to make a bowl game. I think they're a very, very fun team, and kind of like that Colorado team, obviously a very different scenario, but like that Colorado team, they're going to be able to stick with teams that are just better than them, that are more talented, that are more deep, and in that Florida State game, that one's really interesting because Florida State has so many things changing. Georgia Tech doesn't. They have so many things staying the same, and they are going to be a dangerous team this upcoming year. And then finally, Florida. Florida at 4.5 wins. The schedule is a nightmare. I totally get that. This is a much better team than people are giving them credit for. I understand that Miami game might not be a win, but you have at Mississippi State. That should be a win. UCF should be a win. Kentucky should be a win. Samford, if it's not a win, we got a whole other problem going on in Gainesville. So overall, you got 4 wins right there. And then you have games at Tennessee that you've been able to win in the past. You have a game, Texas A&M coming to you, a new coaching staff, a lot of new things over there. Definitely one that they could be able to win. LSU comes to you. Ole Miss comes to you. There is a number of games here where maybe you look at it on paper and it doesn't look the greatest for Florida, but they're going to be able to find a way to win these games. And frankly, I think they're going to get to 6-7 wins this upcoming year because they have a very talented team. They just need a couple of things to go their way. So maybe it's not, the prettiest thing in the world, and maybe they bounce around a little bit, lose to a couple of teams they shouldn't, but beat a couple of teams they shouldn't beat. So definitely going to be a really fun team to watch, and I think they'll find their way to at least 5 wins this upcoming year. Moving on to some Heisman picks, I'll start with Avery Johnson. A lot of these are long shots. I want that to be very clear before we start, so it's not like I'm outright picking these guys to win it, but definitely ones to keep your eye out on, at the very least. This kid is downright electric, and when you look at the Big 12, I think there's good defenses. I'm not, here to tell you the Big 12 is downright bad on defense by any means, but I think there's defenses that can be attacked, and I think Avery Johnson, with the unique skill set that he has, is going to be able to do that. I think in the cards is a Jaden Daniels type year. Now, is he going to be able to throw to 2 NFL wide receivers? Absolutely not. There's no chance of that. But at the end of the day, he can definitely make a number of plays on the ground, and when you can do that, the passing becomes a lot easier to deal with. So I think this guy has the ability to play on the big stages when needed down the stretch of this season, but also has a pretty manageable schedule where there are some lesser opponents that you can really take advantage of. And frankly, I think scheduling that Tulane game in week 3, I believe, maybe week 2, is definitely a huge one for them. I think Avery Johnson could have a huge day, and it could look really good at the end of the year because I think Tulane's going to be a really good team. So overall, I think this is a player that could really make some noise and could be the story of the year, and if that's the case, I'd be surprised if he didn't find his way to NYC. Miller Moss is one we've talked about quite a bit. Lincoln Riley has done this 3 times before. There's very little reason for me to believe he can't do it a 4th. LSU, Michigan, Penn State are all moments he can make a Heisman moment in, and this is an elite thrower of the football. There's no two ways about that. I think he's going to pick up right where he left off in the Holiday Bowl, and he will be in this conversation. I feel pretty good about that. And then finally, Luther Burden, the longest shot here because he's not a quarterback. But there is a Devontae Smith-type season in the cards for him, especially with Brady Cook, who's not necessarily the most jump-off-the-page type quarterback. It could be that he just feeds the ball to Luther Burden and he puts up 2,000 yards and does absolutely crazy stuff this upcoming year. So this is obviously an out-of-bounds pick, out-of-the-box pick by no doubt about that, but overall, I think this is a player that is as good as anyone in the country and definitely can make some noise this upcoming year. Moving on to championship picks, Alabama is one that we just have to talk about. I understand they're likely going to take a step back. I understand the head coaching change and everything in between. This is a really talented team, and I just watched a coach that just competed for a national title, just played for a national title in Kalen DeBoer, take over a more talented team. So if you look at it through that lens, it is a very different conversation, obviously. So I think this is a really, really fun team. I think Jalen Milroe is one of those players that can hit it really, really big. I don't necessarily think he's the most elite player in the world, but let's just say his passing gets 15% better. That's probably enough for this offense to be downright terrifying, and I think this defense is coming along in a way that has to make you feel pretty good. So obviously not the pick that people want, but I think a team that it can absolutely get it done this upcoming year. Tennessee at plus 3,500 is a very interesting team. I think for the most part, at least, when you look at what you need to win a national title, top 20 defense, top 10 offense gets you at least in the conversation. Tennessee has both of those, as far as I'm concerned, or at the very least has the ability to have both of those. The top 20 defense, I feel maybe a little bit better about because of James Pierce Jr., but the top 10 offense, you got to have Nico Iamaleava come along and possibly have a Hendon Hooker type season, but I think he has better wide receiver talent. I think he has a better defense, so that definitely helps this team be a little bit more dangerous, and frankly, I think when you're looking around trying to find that Cinderella run type team, this might be the team you want to look at. A very, very fun team, and one that, if they get into the party, could cause some problems for a lot of people. I'll just leave it at that for the time being. And then Clemson is a team we got to talk about. I understand they're going to be doubted. I understand people are going to make fun of Dabo Swinney for not using the portal, and I don't love it either by any means. But they are a team that has a lot of things in place. They have a defense that is going to be one of the tops in the country. The defensive line is going to be absolutely monstrous, frankly. And if Cade Klubnik can get 20-30% better at hitting his spots, at being on time, at running this offense efficiently, they're going to be able to score points. It might not be, the gaudy offensive numbers that you've seen in the past from some national title winners, but they're going to be able to score, and they're going to be able to hold teams to not a lot of points, and maybe it's ugly wins, maybe it's not the prettiest season for Clemson, not a Trevor Lawrence 2016 type year, but there will be plenty there, or 2018 type year, apologies, but there will be plenty there, and definitely a team that can make some noise, and if they play defensively lights out, they can do a lot of really special things this upcoming year. Overall, I think you look at all the bets as we head into this year, there are a number of ones that definitely deserve to be watched. I think Quinn Ewers is a little bit low on the Heisman ranks if you were to ask me, so definitely another one there, but a lot that I will unpack probably over the next couple of days as we head into this season. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of fall camp intel. Again, there was a million things coming out. We'll likely do it tomorrow and on Friday because there's everything coming out as we get closer to the season. So we'll break down everything you need to know right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Apologies for that, but welcome back. We just talked about some of the best bets I have as we head into this season, but let's get into a little bit of fall camp intel. There is a million things going on and a big-time injury that we need to talk about, so we'll start with that. And it happened over in Austin, Texas, and it happened at the position that they did not need that. A running back injury has happened again at Texas. We saw C.J. Baxter go down with a bad ACL tear, LCL, PCL injury that he's going to be out for the season with. Christian Clark, a very talented freshman running back, has an Achilles tear. He is out for the year. Another huge hit to this room that they did not need one bit. Now, they do still have three guys that are going to contribute. Frankly, Christian Clark was likely the fourth guy on the depth chart after C.J. Baxter went down. So this isn't, the biggest hit in the world, but it was all hands on deck. There's no doubt about that. And it sounds like Ryan Niblett, the very talented wide receiver that tended to be the odd one out when you talked about the rotation there, might be getting run at running back, so that's one to watch. Juan Davis, the tight end, is another one to watch there, a guy that played running back in high school and is very, very athletic. Another one that might have been a little bit out of the groove when it talks about tight ends getting into the game. So a couple of things to watch there. I think they have a number of very capable guys, but at the end of the day, they were walking a little bit of a tightrope before, and it just got a little bit tighter for Texas in the run game. So definitely one to watch there. Although everything else is going great. It sounds like everything else is lining up the exact way you want it to if you're a Texas fan. The defense is finding a groove. Those two guys right there, Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton especially, are making really good plays pretty much every day. So it makes you feel a little bit better. Obviously, the running back injury is not what you want at all. A lot of people have been talking about what the solution is for that. Just put more on Quinn Ewers' shoulders. He is the third-year starter. He is the guy that came back for a reason to win a national title, and this is the way you do it. You take over and you be the player that your team needs you to be. So that would be my answer, but definitely easier said than done absolutely. So definitely one to watch there. We'll move on over to Missouri, and it sounds like this team is a little shaky. Not necessarily bad by any means, but when you had the year that they just had and you want to do some of the things that they want to do this upcoming year, it sounds like Eli Drinkwitz would like to see just a little bit more. Would like to see a little bit more consistency, a little bit more. There were just some mixed reviews overall from the scrimmage this past weekend. Drew Pine, the backup quarterback, apparently played really well, which is huge news for them. Definitely need someone behind Brady Cook to just make you feel a little bit better as you head into this season. A couple of different things to watch is a couple of position battles. The running back battle is one that has been decided. Nate Noel is likely going to be the running back one over Marcus Carroll. Both very talented guys, likely will be plenty in this upcoming season, but it sounds like it will be Nate Noel out of the blocks first, and then Marcus Bryant, the transfer from SMU, is going to be the left tackle there. So a couple of position battles that were kind of lingering a little bit over there in Columbia, Missouri that have now been decided. Over to Penn State, Khalil Dinkins is the guy I want to talk to you about, a very, very talented player. In fact, this tight end room overall looks really, really good. Andrew Rappleyea, I'm doing my best there, and Tyler Warren are obviously very good players. Dinkins is going to be the backup behind Tyler Warren, and it sounds like tight end is exactly what you want it to be for Penn State. Now, the problem is, that doesn't matter too much. Now, it does help, don't get me wrong, but if you don't have the wide receivers, you're not going to be able to make the plays, plain and simple. And they feel good about Trey Wallace, or Harrison Wallace as I've called him. I'll call him Trey Wallace from now on, but Liam Clifford is playing really good football. Julian Fleming is the one that it feels like they don't really know where he fits. It feels like they don't really know where they want him to be. They have him at the same position of Harrison Wallace, and they think Harrison Wallace is better. So definitely something to watch as we get closer to the season. They brought in Julian Fleming to be their wide receiver 1. There's a reality where he doesn't even start. Omari Evans is another guy to watch there. I think Julian Fleming will likely start, but as of right now, it doesn't look like they have a set position for him to be in right now. Michigan is one to watch. The confidence coming out of Ann Arbor is just very obvious. They feel very confident in what Alex Orji can do this upcoming year. They think he's making big-time strides. The O-line and D-line look great. Obviously, the O-line is the bigger news of that one, so that'll definitely be one to watch. Jayshawn Barham is the guy I want to talk to you about, though. He is getting comparisons to Devin Bush, and if you're a Michigan fan, that feels pretty good to hear. He's a very, very talented, athletic linebacker, and definitely one that could take their defense to the next level. And frankly, if he hits the way that they're talking about him, no one's going to be able to score. The same way that they weren't able to score before on Michigan, it'll be much like that. And then on the back end, Ricky Johnson is someone that out of UNLV that is making a ton of really good plays. Wesley Walker out of Tennessee is another guy to watch back there. But at the very least, they'll be rotating in. They could easily be starters when that first week comes around. So a couple of big-time transfers that they brought in on the back end to make up for Rod Moore and Keon Saab. Rod Moore going down with an injury, Keon Saab moving on to Alabama, and they did a really, really good job, it seems. Moving over to USC, Lincoln Riley said the defense really stood out in the first scrimmage, which tends to happen with pretty much every team, but at the end of the day, USC was a little bit further behind than a lot of different teams, so it has to make you feel a little bit better about that defense. And freshman Braylon Conley, the guy on your screen right there, has really caught some eyes. He's been someone that has been really all over the field, played a lot of really good football at that corner position, and frankly, I think that's what could really change the season for USC. If they can go out on an island and say, that's a corner we feel really confident, even if he is a freshman who is going to have some struggle points, but if you feel confident 80% of the time, 90% of the time that he can do his job and keep that guy in front of him, you're going to feel really good about what you can do on defense. So overall, USC doesn't need a lot of players to come along. They need a couple. And at the end of the day, if it's a corner that's a freshman, then so be it. That's just the way it's going to be. Overall, if you're looking for a worry area, O-line would be that area. They are not as deep as they want to be. They are not where they want to be. So if they run into injuries, definitely one to watch. I did want to talk about the two teams that we're going to see in 10 days, so we'll get to Georgia Tech right here. DJ Moore, a defensive back, tore his ACL. He will be out for the year. Obviously, terrible for news for him and for this back end because they have a number of players back there that can play, but this is a guy that was huge for them and definitely someone that they expected to be a huge piece for them. Now, the defense has been playing really well, it seems. It feels like everything is coming along the way that they want to. They added a couple of linebackers from the portal. EJ Lightsey came over from UGA. Taj Butler, I can't exactly remember where he came over from, if I'm being totally honest, but a very talented player, and both of them are playing really, really well right now. I think EJ Lightsey is someone that is going to be huge for this team, honestly, throughout this season. And then finally, you have a backup running back that has come along. Freshman Anthony Carey is a very talented guy, and it sounds like he's going to be a big-time player. Chad Alexander is another one to watch at that position, but it's going to be everyone behind Jamal Haynes, obviously the very talented running back there, but it sounds like they got some guys behind him that can pick up the slack if need be. The team that they're going to play is Florida State, and things seem to be going pretty smoothly over there. DJ had a pretty solid day where he showed some of his arm talent, did some really, really nice things, threw a really nice pass to Tuafili, apparently, for a long touchdown with Fentrell Cypress in coverage, which matters a lot because it's a really good coverage corner. So it sounds like he's doing what he needs to do. It sounds like he's executing the way he needs to, and maybe it won't be, lighting the world on fire, but definitely a player that can make some noise and definitely a player that I think is going to be able to do enough. I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to win a national title for them or win games single-handedly, but he can execute, and that's really all you need him to do because it sounds like a lot of other things are coming into place. One of the things to watch is Cam Davis, a very talented freshman running back. It sounds like he is just about everything you want. He is a terrifying guy when he comes off the bus, definitely a guy that is very intimidating, but he's got speed, he's got shiftiness, he's got everything that you need him to have, so he's going to be dangerous. There's no two ways about that. This running room is absolutely ridiculous overall, so he might have to wait his turn just a little bit, but it sounds like he's going to be a little bit hard to keep off the field. The other guy I want to talk about is Cam Riley, a very talented linebacker that bounced around a little bit in the portal before finding his way down to Tallahassee, and it sounds like he's making every type of play you want him to make. The only real worry I had about this defense was that linebacker position, because it felt like they didn't have a guy at that position that you could feel really confident in. Now it feels like they do. It feels like Cam Riley is going to be that guy going forward and is definitely going to be a huge player for them. So NC State loved to have him for the second that they did. It sounds like Florida State is loving it as they have him now. So definitely a huge pickup there and one that will definitely make some noise. Over at Miami, I want to talk about the freshmen, and frankly, it's likely going to be the case this year and maybe even next year, likely a little bit less next year, which is the goal over at Miami, but these freshmen are just a little bit more talented than some of the veterans they have on the roster. Elijah Lofton's the guy I want to talk about. This is a beast at tight end. He's going to be an absolute monster. He's going to make all types of plays, and my guy Anthony in here told me that he should have been my pick for Freshman Impact Player of the Year for them. He was probably right. I won't argue with that. Zaquan Patterson's another guy on that back end that's going to make huge amounts of plays for that defense this upcoming year. And then you have JoJo Trader making plays at wide receiver. So on either side of the ball, there are plenty of freshmen that are making some big-time plays there. And then Michelle Powell, a veteran on that defense, someone they brought in from Washington to kind of help stabilize that back end a little bit. Apparently he had a pick on Saturday in the scrimmage, and he's also becoming a big-time leader. And that's the biggest thing for this team because last year they had two guys that were very veteran. You know, Cameron Kitchens, James Williams, both guys that maybe they didn't play the most beautiful football in the world when they were playing last year, but at the end of the day, they were voices. They were people that you needed on that back end for communication and for a number of different things. You need someone to take that place, and I think Michelle Powell is really kind of the only answer there, so huge news that he's kind of coming along the way that you want him to. He's likely going to play that nickelback kind of position, which I've talked about before, is one of the most important positions in that back end. So definitely one to watch there. A really, really talented player that played really good football at Washington a year ago. Definitely was a huge part of their team getting where they got, and now he's down at Miami, and overall, it sounds like everything's rolling really smoothly for the Hurricanes right now. It sounds like they're rolling into Gainesville in week 1 and feel really confident. Mark Fletcher, I know, was down with a little bit of an injury, but sounds like he's back and he will be more than healthy for week 1, so not a worry there. Overall, fall camp is still crazy, and it's going to be crazy until this thing kicks off. We will keep you updated probably every day. I know it's a little, it's a lot of information pretty much every day during this segment, but overall, you got to know all of it. As we head into the season, you don't want to get into the field and say, who's that player for Florida State at running back? It's Cam Davis, a very talented freshman. You never want to be caught a little bit confused when that ball is kicked off. So doing my best to keep you updated. Definitely a lot of stuff that I'm sure I missed throughout the country, but overall doing my best to keep you guys as updated as I can. But let's take our last break here, and when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of a headline catch-up. There were a couple of things around Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. There were a couple of things around Deion, as you can imagine. So we'll break down all of the different things you need to know and some very interesting headlines right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just gave you a couple of updates from fall camp. We'll do it again tomorrow with a number of different things coming out early today and likely later today as well. So we'll break it all down for you on tomorrow's show as you need to know it. But let's get into a little bit of a headline catch up. There are a number of things that happened over the last couple of days, week or so that I want to break down for you all, and We'll start in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where there was a little bit of an interesting conversation over the last week or so. It sounds like Ward Manuel, the AD over at Michigan, had offered Jim Harbaugh the position to be the honorary captain for that Week 1 matchup against Fresno State on August 31st. He has declined that offer. It sounds like he is not going to be there. It sounds like he's going to stay and prepare for that season opener for the Chargers against the Raiders on the 8th. So not overly surprising to me. I think it's one of those things that you get into this year, and frankly, I thought this would have been kind of funny. I understand there were people that were really mad about it, said that he shouldn't be invited back until, 4 years or whatever the distinction is. But at the end of the day, it would have been kind of funny if Jim Harbaugh was the only head coach on the sideline because Jerome Moore got suspended. But at the end of the day, it's going to be very interesting to kind of watch this develop. He said he didn't want to be a distraction to this team, and I understand that. I think it's probably the right decision for everyone involved that he is not on the sideline, because you don't get some of that bad press that you likely would have gotten if he was, and maybe you don't have a situation where your head coach isn't even on the sideline, but your former head coach is. So definitely would have been a very interesting situation there. But overall, I think a good decision from Harbaugh. I think Michigan probably should have waited a little bit longer, but it doesn't necessarily matter. At the end of the day, when he walks into that stadium, whenever he does, as an honorary captain, which will be happening at some point here in the next year, 2 years, I don't know, but it will be happening, I can promise you that. Whenever it does happen, it's going to be a crazy standing ovation. So I fully understand getting that juice behind the team as they head into the season, and I get why Michigan did this. I thought it would have been kind of funny to see come to fruition, but overall, probably the right decision from everyone involved to not have this happen, and definitely the right decision for Jim Harbaugh to kind of leave himself out of that for the time being, at least. Moving on, Deion Sanders made some headlines, and imagine that. He does that quite often, and a lot of that is because he is who he is. But it sounds like Deion got a question. Well, actually, the question wasn't the problem by any means. The person, who he works for, was the problem. But it sounds like a CBS reporter was at the press conference. A lot of you might have seen this video, and he tried to ask a question about this upcoming season. Said he was from CBS Denver, CBS Colorado, I can't remember. And and Deion cut him off. Said he wasn't going to take his question because what CBS did was foul, is the way that he put it. I don't know what this is about. A lot of people have pointed to Deion being ranked second to last in the Big 12 head coaching rankings. Frankly, I wouldn't have him that low, but that should not make him mad. If that is what, really caused this to happen, then he can't talk to anyone, because there are enough people and at enough agencies around the country that have written articles that are not glowing about Deion Sanders as a head coach. I can promise you that, so I can't imagine that's the reason. The other reason that has been thrown out there is they did some reporting on Shiloh Sanders filing for bankruptcy. I don't know what that real full story is there, but overall, when I read the article, it looked like reporting to me. I don't know if that, rubbed Deion the wrong way, or there was something in there that wasn't fully accurate. I don't know. But at the end of the day, from where I was sitting reading that article, didn't look like there were too many problems with it. But he's from a different lens. There's no two ways about that. He also got into it with another reporter when they asked about the O-line chemistry going into this year, and he said, you can succeed and work with a lot of people you don't have chemistry with. He's absolutely right about that point. There's no doubt about that. You can definitely do that. He could have just answered the question. He could have just said, they're coming along, they're finding their way, and moved on. But at the end of the day, it's Deion Sanders. He's going to do his thing his own way, and there's going to be some of these moments in press conferences that get a number of headlines. Overall, I don't much care about this one. I think it's an interesting story. I think it's one that people will use against Deion. He should answer the question. I'm not here to say he absolutely is totally right for doing what he did, but at the end of the day, I think it doesn't necessarily make too big of a difference, and definitely one of those things that is likely going to happen throughout his career. So overall, I didn't necessarily pull too much away from that, but it's definitely something that gave people on Twitter something to talk about, at the very least. Florida is the other team I want to talk about. It looked like they're looking to hire a GM of revenue sharing. So this is something they're consulting with the athletic group, which has worked with a number of different universities to put together a general manager. It sounds like this is going to be a little bit more specific of a role. Billy Napier's in on this. Scott Strickland, the AD right there, obviously is in on this. They're working with a group that worked with the Eagles, Jack Rosenberg was with the Eagles, a former executive for the Eagles, and definitely was a huge help for him. It sounds like they are advising Oklahoma at the same time, so this is likely going to be something that just happens across the country, if I had to imagine. I think when you look at this, big time programs, you now have no cap on what you can do with the staff. You can play around with that thing a ton, and I think they're going to do that a ton. So definitely one of those things that it's a weird position. It's one that I frankly did not know we were going to have here pretty soon, but overall, it's one that you're going to see across the country. It's one that you're absolutely going to want, and it's one that definitely, the Texas and Alabamas and Georgias of the world will likely have this in place here pretty soon, because it is a very, very interesting world they're walking into that not a lot of them have a ton of experience in. There's no doubt about that. So definitely one to watch, and would be a very interesting hire, and one that I expect a lot of other schools to follow suit in. Hugh Freeze, I want to talk about here for a second. He got some people mad this weekend. He said he, quote-unquote, should have 4 wins over Nick Saban. He said Nick Saban is incredible. I should have 4 wins over him. We beat him twice at Ole Miss and went up 24-3 in the third year. I wasn't smart enough to slow it down, and then last year could have easily gone our way. So this made a lot of Bama fans very mad, as you can imagine. Anytime you take a shot at the GOAT, you're going to get a lot of Bama fans very mad at you. He's not wrong. I'll be totally honest with you. When you look at that Ole Miss game back in 2016, they should have won that game. The fact that they didn't win that game is out of this world crazy. They should have been able to just run the ball and roll to a victory in that game. So that he's totally right on. And frankly, Auburn definitely should have won that game a year ago. And there is a very specific reason why they didn't win that game, which is they rushed 2 guys and they dropped 9 in coverage. And I don't care who you are, if you're Jalen Milroe, if you're me, if I'm able to stand back there the entire day and find an open receiver, I'm going to find one at some point. And that was exactly what Jalen Milroe did. So overall, I think, we can talk about should-haves all we want. It doesn't matter. No one cares about should-haves. No one cares about, Ole Miss missing the mark in 2016 and not running the ball down the stretch. No one cares that Isaiah Bond or no one cares that you should have won that game, because Isaiah Bond caught the ball in the corner of the end zone and they won that game and they moved on to the playoffs. So overall, I think it's one of those things that, yeah, he's right. There's no doubt about it. He should have won those games, and it's his fault that they didn't win those games. And also, it's kind of a funny thing where Hugh Freeze hypothetically should have 4 wins over Nick Saban, but he has 2 wins and he has 2 very close calls. That's about as close as anyone's gotten to Nick Saban throughout his career. So Hugh Freeze being the thorn in Nick Saban's side, not necessarily a big thing. Not necessarily a big thorn, because Nick Saban was an absolute dominating force. So even in a world where Hugh Freeze has been the big time problem and has been the thorn in his side, it's not that bad by any means, because Nick Saban was that dominant throughout his career. But moving on to the final one here, Florida State and ACC look like they are heading towards mediation. Obviously, there are a number of different court cases involved in this. There are 2 with Florida State and ACC, one in Florida, one in North Carolina. So definitely one to watch. One of those things that is going to be very, very interesting as we get into it. But we're probably a pretty long way from a conclusion here. We're probably a pretty long way from this thing really being figured out, because from where I'm standing, the ACC has no intention on taking less money, and Florida State has no intention on giving the amount that the ACC wants. So overall, I think it's one of those things that will definitely be really interesting to watch. We'll definitely get into it as it kind of unfolds, and definitely could be something that informs what happens with the ACC going forward. But frankly, I don't think tons is going to change until you have that look-in clause in February of next year with ESPN, because that's when a lot of this stuff really starts to happen. That's when the SEC starts looking in your direction, the Big Ten starts looking in your direction, and maybe starts to tear you down just a little bit. But that's obviously something we can get into. Jim Phillips has been very honest about, they are not budging. They are willing to fight as long as it takes, and he feels that these 2 entities have created a not so great environment in his conference. So I can't imagine it's going to be great conversations. Now, mediation is supposed to be a nice civil conversation where you find a conclusion. I think they'll find something of a conclusion. I don't know how, great they're going to be in terms of conversation. I don't know how kind they're going to be about it. But overall, I think it's going to be a very interesting thing because it's going to inform a lot. It's going to inform how Clemson goes about business in their arguments. It's going to inform how some other teams in the ACC look at this upcoming year and look at the future in the ACC. It's going to inform a lot of the different things that happen around conference realignment, and definitely will be something that matters a whole lot. I think we're quite a ways from this thing being decided by any means, but definitely will be one of those things that I think a lot of people will be checking in on throughout the next couple of months to a year, and we'll figure out what's going to happen with it at the very end. But overall, it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's a step towards, getting a answer for all of the crazy stuff that's going on and getting an answer to all of the insane things that has been happened over this past year. So definitely a good news at the very least. It's a step forward. That's all we really need at the end of the day with this confusion that's going on over at the ACC. Anthony had a question over here. Yeah, I think I look at Miami as a team that I could put at a number of different places in the top 25. They're as dangerous as they come as you go into the season, so I could put them up, in the top 15, 14 possibly, and then I could possibly drop them down to the 19 range, and I think that's roughly where they were in this ranking. So I think there's a lot of questions there. Obviously, whenever you bring in a number of transfers, there's going to be questions, but if you look at the outright talent, they're one of the more talented teams in the country. If you look at Cam Ward under center, he's one of the most talented guys in the country. So I'd probably have him a little bit higher than the AP poll had him. I believe I did have him a little bit higher, and frankly, they could go up a number of places higher if you really wanted to, because it's going to be a really good team this upcoming year. There are just some questions as you head into it. So maybe it's a little bit of, you'll believe it when you see it with Miami, but frankly, I'm already kind of believing it. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.